a beautician whose 6-year-old daughter died of meningitis and sepsis after a 2-hour delay in A&E. Said medical staff dismissed her as a paranoid mother. Kirsty Ermenekli, 32, from Manchester, had taken her Layla to hospital after the youngster developed a high temperature and complained of being lethargic and sick. But when a medic did eventually examine her at Royal Oldham Hospital in Greater Manchester, he suggested the youngster go home despite concerns from a nurse. When her symptoms persisted, Layla was admitted to a children's ward where a junior pediatric doctor suggested a telltale rash mark on her hip was a bruise. The youngster's condition deteriorated shortly afterwards and she died just 8 hours after her arrival at the hospital. At the hearing into her death, mother of 3 Mrs Ermenekli from Failsworth, near Manchester, broke down in tears as she condemned the treatment of her daughter and said, "I have concerns regarding the length of time we were in A&E and no blood test was done. I felt I was being looked at as a paranoid mother and the doctors couldn't be bothered. I was not being kept informed of development. I couldn't fault the care on the children's ward, but all that time in A&E could have made a difference and Layla should have been admitted sooner." There was a conversation with a nurse who said the doctor talked about me going home and saying, "Are you happy?" I said, "No, not particularly, no. I know she's not well. I've got 2 children at home and I thought it was something from the other children. I wouldn't have taken her to hospital. It's not somewhere you want to be on a Friday night, but because her temperature was not coming down I took her." Call it mother's instinct. Nobody knows their child better. Now I'm more paranoid than ever. At the time I thought she was in the best care. Earlier the Haywood inquest was told Layla was a thriving child who enjoyed lessons at the Oasis Academy School in Oldham. Her family said she was quiet and shy and she loved to play with her friends, dance and make music videos. The tragedy occurred in February 2017 after she was taken ill and her mother, who was pregnant at the time, took her to the hospital. Mrs Ermenekli added, "My mum picked her up from school and the teacher said from 2:20 she was complaining of headache and stomachache. She told my mum she was tired and mom gave her some Calpol. I finished work early to pick her up and brought her home, but her temperature was 40.9. I phoned 111 but felt I was passed from pillar to post and there was no urgency. I took her to A&E as I knew something was not right. We arrived at hospital at 8:30-9 p.m. and Layla was lethargic and unwell. We were there about 2 hours and at about 10 p.m. she said she was hot, so I spoke to a nurse and her temperature was still 38.1. I had to give her so many milliliters of water every 5 minutes for an hour. The triage process was done by a nurse, but it felt like ages before the doctor came, a good couple of hours. We were seen by the nurse 3 times in between, but I was quite concerned as I had never had a child with a temperature that high with it not coming down. At 10:45 p.m. the doctor came and when he examined her throat she was sick and continued to be sick. But the doctor told me I could go home with her and continue giving her fluids. It was said she had a viral infection. The doctor said we can either continue the fluid challenge here or at home. Any problems, bring her back. The nurse came and asked how I felt about her going home, but I said I was not happy and the nurse said she was not either. I didn't know anything about this rash or bruising until the junior doctor from pediatrics came down and pointed it out to me. He said, "Has she banged herself?" And I said, "No, she's been on the bed all night." A bruise starts slowly coming, but what was there? It was bright. I didn't want to take Layla home, but I felt I was pushed to take her home. She was sick and had more marks and was still complaining of head and stomachache. Staff put a cannula in and she was given antibiotics, but then she developed breathing difficulties. I was becoming very worried and phoned my sister. I asked staff what was wrong with her. They said they thought it was an infection but couldn't be sure. When they spotted more marks, she deteriorated. Staff started to resuscitate her, but it was unsuccessful, and at 4:50 a.m. she died. Not once was I told how serious her condition was. If I'd have known this, I would have rung her dad. I'm more aware with sepsis you have got to act quick at the early stages. If you go past, you've got no chance. They do call it a silent killer because you have to detect it in an early stage, because the outcome is Layla. Layla passed away from meningococcal meningitis and septicemia, which was later described as having one of the worst cases of meningitis doctors had ever seen. An internal report by the hospital later revealed there were missed opportunities to accurately diagnose her, which led to a fateful 3.5-hour delay in treatment. The internal report carried out by the Pennine Acute Hospital's NHS Trust found doctors used an old document when assessing Layla Rose. It also states the mother's concerns were not listened to, while there were 2 missed opportunities to recognize the rash. The report said the doctor who saw the patient initially did not recognize the rash, which was not documented at the time as being of a worrying nature. As a result, the diagnosis of sepsis was missed for 3.5 hours, during which treatment opportunities were missed. A second opportunity to spot any rashes was missed when the rash was noted prior to transfer and escalated. False reassurance was given that this was not a new finding, so no action was taken. Meningitis is inflammation of the membranes that surround and protect the brain and spinal cord. Anyone can be affected, but at-risk people include those aged under 5, 15 to 24, and over 45. People exposed to passive smoking or with suppressed immune systems, such as patients undergoing chemotherapy, are also more at risk. The most common forms of meningitis are bacterial and viral. Symptoms for both include bacterial meningitis. Bacterial meningitis requires urgent treatment at hospital with antibiotics. Some 10% of bacterial cases are fatal. Of those who survive, 1 in 3 suffer complications, including brain damage and hearing loss. Limb amputation is a potential side effect if septicemia, blood poisoning, occurs. Vaccines are available against certain strains of bacteria that cause meningitis, such as tuberculosis. Viral meningitis. Viral is rarely life-threatening but can cause long-lasting effects, such as headaches, fatigue and memory problems. Thousands of people suffer from viral meningitis every year in the UK. Treatment focuses on hydration, painkillers and rest, although ineffective. Antibiotics may be given when patients arrive at hospital just in case they are suffering from the bacterial form of the disease. Source: meningitis. Now, the report says there was failure to identify the advanced nature of the sepsis and treat accordingly, as well as failure to recognize a bruise as a purpuric rash and therefore as an indicator of meningococcal sepsis. The hearing was told Layla should have been seen by a doctor at 9:05 p.m. but wasn't seen until 10:45 p.m. Expert witness Dr. Sandy Bohan said, "That's too late. It's that very early initial recognition of the signs presented to you. There was enough in that very early stage to have triggered positive measures." The hearing continues.
Tell me where the freak's at.